I think it's a no-brainer. I think anyone that isn't leveraging partnerships in their go-to-market is, one, probably going to fall off.
The right introduction can unlock so much for you. It can unlock a job. It can unlock a new customer. It can unlock a lot.
That short-term thinking destroys your ability to become a long-term business.
Real talk backed up with real action. This is GTM News Desk.
I'm Nick Bennett.
And I'm Mark Hillens.
Let's see what's trending.
Welcome to the GTM News Desk. My name is Mark Hillens. Thank you again for joining us for another episode. I'm here with Nick Bennett. Nick, what's going on?
It's a beautiful day outside. Can't
It's a
complain.
cute wave. If you're watching the video.
Did you like that? I always feel like it's so weird. Like when you end like Zoom or Google Meet calls, like do you wave to people? Because like I'm always one that like typically waves, and I'm like, why am I waving?
I usually throw the peace sign. Peace.
I wonder if there was data around that like I would love to survey like 1,000 people and be like, at the end of a call, whether you're the prospect internally, whatever, like how many people wave to the other side to say bye? Because like usually when you're in person, you shake hands or you wave or you do something. So it's like I feel like it's a similar piece to that.
Yeah, just do a LinkedIn post. I've seen LinkedIn posts about this. Just do it right after this. You get some reactions. So today is all about networks, talking about people. We're going to go deep on the idea of using networks to get to that introduction, to get to more revenue. We get a great guest in the third segment today, Mac Reddin. He's a TAC customer. We've been working with Mac for a long, long time, helping him run his go-to-market. He has created what is called Go-To Network. So the first two news stories we have today is around the insanely cheap ways you can start a business now. Like it is so cheap. Like I saw a story the other day from Wix.com, and GoDaddy, both two different companies, kind of playing the same space, Nick, that were saying you can use AI now to start your business. Use AI. They will build your logo, get you a domain, file your LLC. Hell, they might even set up a bank account for you. So starting a business, it's so easy. Anyone can do it. The thing that's really hard is trying to grow that business. So the idea is, how do you use networks? The networks that you have, that maybe your founding team members have, that your first few customers have, if you have investors or friends and family that they have, to get you some durable growth using the atomic unit of trust as a way to do that. Because if you look at this Andrew Chen article, Nick, it unpacks the idea of, yes, funding has gone up. It's obviously come down from the 2020, 2021 highs. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people being able to start a business without even needing any funding. Forget like VC money, forget anything else. You can just start a business. But how do you get that product or the solution to that problem into the right hands of the right people? It's about going to where the trust and the attention already exists through getting an introduction through someone else. Today's episode is all about that. And Andrew Chen, has some great stats about that in this article that's in the show notes. You should take a look at it. And I first learned about this, started to read more about this early days HubSpot, Nick, when Brian and Dharmesh came out on stage back in some early days of Inbound, the Inbound event, and said it's becoming easier and easier to start a business with so many things that you can do now with offshoring and drop shipping and all these things. But how do you sustain the success and the growth of that business? That is becoming much, much harder.
I think a perfect example of that is how we started TAC. Like if you think about it, like you and I have both had networks and relationships for the years. And most people, when they start a business, like regardless if you're selling, software, if you're selling services, whatever it is, like first couple of months, I mean, maybe even a little bit longer is tough. Now, if you look back to our own results, and maybe we just caught the wave at the right time, like we got pretty fortunate, and our guest, Mac, who's going to be on here, was one of the first TAC customers ever. But I personally think the way that we cultivated our networks, the way that we built that trust over the years, the way that we continued to deliver value, ultimately played a piece into building the business and getting it off the ground and feeling good about it, even in those first, couple of months.
But to that point, we had distribution built in. We had an audience. We even had maybe a semblance of a community. In fact, we actually built a community before we started the business officially to test the idea of what we could actually sell, how we could monetize this, who could we sell to. So it's the idea of minimal viable audience before minimal viable product. which we've definitely talked about, just reiterating that, build an audience at the same time as you build a product, or build an audience first to help you build a product versus building a product, because the creation of something has gone down, not maybe to zero, but close to zero. The distribution of something has continually gone up over the last many, many years.
Yeah, 100%. It makes perfect sense to me. And I think it's, like you said, I think AI makes it easier. Like it's just, and I mean, I don't know, a couple of years, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm sure it's even going to be easier. And everyone's going to be popping up businesses. But I've talked to a lot of people, even when we got going, and it was just like people were struggling. Some people went back in-house because of how much they were struggling. One, because of the economy, but two, but I just think they just didn't have a viable audience that they built and cultivated over the years. And I think that was one thing that we had going for us. And I'm just interested to see like how AI plays even more into this over the next 5-10 years.
What's story number 2, the second segment of today's episode?
Yeah, so we've got the Harvard Business School. So talking about network effects. So when you think about network effects and everything about it, so you've got direct network effects, which is the users on one side of the platform. And then you've got the indirect network effects, which is more users on one side that improve the experience for the users on the other side. So basically, like say, sellers versus buyers. So it improves the overall platform's value. And I think having Mac on, I mean, he talks a bit about this and how, Commsor has kind of built a lot of this. And I think they're a perfect example of someone that has seen both direct and indirect kind of network effects of everything. Because ultimately, what that allows you to do is you optimize the user experience using those network effects. Because I mean, it's word of mouth, dark social, whatever you want to call it. If someone has a good experience, they'll tell their network that all those people in their network are going to go sign up. And it's how all these, apps and stuff start to go viral. And it's like, I told 30 people in Tack Insider, and all of a sudden 30 people go to download something. And it's like those 30 people tell another 100 people. And it's like, it just kind of continues to compound, which goes into kind of my last 2 pieces from this article. Talks about building a community. So how do you create a community around your platform where people can engage with it? Obviously we did Tack Insider. I know there's a lot of other communities that kind of use that as a way to get others to engage, to ultimately move into other pieces. And strategic partnerships. I mean, partnerships is at the core of People First. Everything that we do, distribution, amplification is with a partner. And so the article talked a lot about like, how do you collaborate with complementary services to expand your user base? It's just co-marketing at the end of the day, or co-selling, however you want to look at it. I think it's a no-brainer. I think anyone that isn't leveraging partnerships in their go-to-market is, one, probably going to fall off, but two, is just missing a huge opportunity.
Well, yeah, network effects, if you dumb it down, it's not exactly this, but just to say, to make it easy to understand, it's word of mouth. Like, how do you create leverage to help you create some type of an effect that compounds, typically, right? And there's many different types of network effects, and they can be driven through one flywheel. Like you create one type of network effect, and for example, Amazon has many different network effects that are built into these different flywheels, because they have people that are selling stuff, they have people that are the shippers, and they brought more and more of this in house. But like they have people that sell, ship, distribute. They have advertisers now advertise. Like everything they kind of do is created a network effect into the other thing to self-perpetuate the other thing's growth, which is ultimately what you want to do, right? You want to say, well, yeah, I'm going to do this community. There's network effects there that's going to help me grow this thing. So that's going to help me do this, right? So it's like these mini flywheels almost, if you will, and every business is trying to create network effects. I mean, you definitely are, because traditionally a good network effect reduces the cost of acquiring a customer. And ultimately a great network effect helps you reduce the cost of acquiring a customer, but helps you retain more customers, because the effect of, hey, the more people that use this product, well, take LinkedIn, for example, the network effect there is if more people use it, there's more value because the users are the product. Social networks are a very classic example of network effects. Yeah, there's, again, a lot of different types of network effects. We're not going to go into great detail on that. To your point, you covered a little bit on it. But you do want to try to find, and as you think about, going into another fiscal year, if you're thinking about what you can do to strengthen the defensibility of your business, trying to understand how to create some type of network effect that either helps you increase retention, decrease CAC, or both, is really important. We used to talk about this all the time at HubSpot. Like, I'm sure they still do all the time, Nick. We would talk about network effects and how can we do it? And like HubSpot Academy, when I was leading that effort and team, we really focus on the ways in which we create network effects within HubSpot Academy members and users. How do we get more people to invite friends, colleagues to learn? How do we use certifications as a signal of trust to then create a network effect that says, oh, you have that certification? That means you're more intelligent or smarter about something. I need to get that certification, right? So it's those types of things. So they could be deliberately designed to help your business grow. But if you think about what it is, it's a network of either like, I mean, in many ways, people, but of some type of signal that allows the network to grow and expand and kind of self-perpetuate itself.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. I mean, I think a business, if you're a marketer, seller, but definitely someone who runs a business, CEO, like if you haven't looked into network effects or if you haven't looked into them recently, definitely something to look into. And they got some good examples here, like you said, right? Like the partnership side, obviously social media, but it's also about like how you design your product in terms of like the distribution, element, or how you think about like if you have PLG motion or a 50% type PLG motion, like how do you get more people into your product through, hey, I'm going to invite them to this, right? Like through referrals, through these things. Data is a network effect, right? The more data you have creates a better effect because that data can be used to then potentially create other products or find other people, right? So a lot of these data providers have built-in network effects. It's a really interesting exercise, and I highly recommend people actually study that.
Love that. Cool. Well, let's go jump into our next segment with Mac. Excited to have everyone listen to it.
Let's go do it. Welcome, Mac Reddin, to our exclusive interview segment during today's show. Mac, what's going on, my friend?
Oh, the usual. Having fun, keeping busy.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a quick plug, Mac and Nick, because Commsor has been a longtime TAC customer. Mac and I are partners in crime. I help Mac run the go-to-market side of Commsor, and folks, if you want help with marketing, go-to-market, go to Mac. Ask him how I'm doing. He'll give you the full and honest truth.
The good and the bad.
The good and the bad. And the ugly.
Yeah.
But Mac, it's great to have you on the show. We've been meaning to have you. We're so philosophically aligned between what Commsor is doing, what TAC is saying and preaching and teaching. This is going to be a very exciting, fast-moving conversation. I want to keep it pretty specific. I'll say that much. So let's get into the details. Quickly, though, to tee everything up, give everyone the 1-minute definition of go-to-network.
Go-to-network essentially is about two things, about building and activating networks around your business. Some of those networks you happen to have naturally, customers, investors, etc. Some require building, audience, community, etc. And it's about building them and then leveraging them to get to the market. So rather than a direct go-to-market approach of like, instead of standing in a room being like, hey, do you want to buy my stuff? It's basically like, how do you get a subset of that room to come closer around you, build relationships there, and then activate them to amplify your voice out into the market? So it's partnerships, it's community building, it's social selling. It's really like a subset of go-to-market strategies that we've kind of collected under this umbrella of go-to-network.
Not bad. I'll give you a B. I'll give you a B.
Hey, it's a passing grade. I'll take it.
The key for everyone listening, as you listen to what Mac's going to talk about in this segment and then in the exclusive segment, is around the idea of getting an introduction. The right introduction can unlock so much for you. It can unlock a job. It can unlock a new customer. It can unlock a renewal. It can unlock a friendship. It can unlock a lot. So getting to the introduction is what go-to-network is about. So Mac, early stage company listening to this show right now, what are 2 tangible things they can do with this idea of using go-to-network to help them unlock introductions?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're VC backed, the low hanging fruit is tap into your VC network. And it seems so obvious. And I can't tell you how often I talk to a founder who's like, oh yeah. And you're like, yeah, like, other portfolio companies that your VCs have invested in, or they know people, like just ask them. And a very common play, I mean, I did this in a pre-Commsor world, was like, you build those, when you send out your monthly investor update, you take your top 20 accounts or 50 accounts you're trying to break into, and you just put them in a spreadsheet and you say, hey, investors, can you indicate which of these you can help me with? And then you just go through and maybe 10 of them you can get help with, 20, 30, whatever it is. And then you write a forwardable email for each one and hopefully get intros that way. The other one I'd say is if you're not VC backed, hopefully you have some customers already. I think if you don't have like 10 customers yet, you shouldn't be even like building go-to-market strategies yet. You're just hustling to get 10 customers. There's not a lot of this like concreteness happening yet. If you have happy customers, which hopefully you've got 10 at this point, leverage them. I love calling it reverse referrals, which is very often companies build referral programs and they go, hey, Nick, you're a huge fan of my company and my product. Please refer people. And then they sit back and they're like, is he going to do it? Is he not going to do it? And like very often you'll see referral programs, they get a huge bump for like Q1, Q2. And then by Q3, they're like, why is no one referring anymore? It's because you're not the first priority for your customer, right? They're not thinking about who should buy your thing. They're thinking about who should buy their thing or their service. So the reverse referral is basically just asking. It's an intro request, right? But I think when it's a customer, it becomes more referral based. It's saying, hey, Nick, I know you know Mark because you work with him or you used to work with him or you're connected on LinkedIn or whatever. Can you refer him to me? I'll still pay you the $1,000 referral fee I was going to pay you. But now I'm doing the work for you.
I was going to say, I like that. And, it's so interesting. That's a fantastic way to make extra money. For everyone that's listening, I'm sure you all know Scott Leese. I've talked to Scott a billion times. I know Mac knows him. He was telling me a story about a month ago, and he was just like, all I did was a quick intro to a company, and he made $35,000 off of a referral because it was a percentage of the amount that was closed. But all he had to do was make one quick intro. He's like, it literally took me 30 seconds. And he's like, think about that ROI. And like the fantastic example.
That is 30 seconds, a decade in the making though, right? He's able to make the intro because of all the work that got in, right? It's not like I can't just like forward an intro request to a random person. They're going to be like, who are you? So it doesn't look like it's overnight success, a decade in the making, that sort of action, which is also why like you should treat your network as an asset worth investing in, whether it's going to be a future hire, a future job, or referral fee, whatever it is, like it's an asset and you should treat it as such.
Love that. So let's talk about like what role does actually, trust, authenticity, whatever you want to call it, play when you're building these meaningful business networks, throughout the years.
I mean, the short answer is it's everything. That's the whole point. That's it. That's the reason, right? Like that's the reason why it works so well, right? The reason why cold calls or cold outreach have such low conversion rates is you're trying to brute force trust, like out the gate. You're like, hey, Nick, you've never met me. You want to buy my shit? That's like, if you really sum up like 99% of sales and marketing tactics, that's what it is. Whether it's an ad or a cold call or a cold email, it's, hey, want to buy my shit? You never heard of me. Want to buy my shit? And that's why you see stats of like, you need 1,400 of those touch points for someone to go, you know what? Maybe I will check out your shit, basically, right? But it's like 1,400 of that's insane. By the way, that's the average amount of outbound touch points, ads, emails, calls, whatever, to get a deal in the pipeline for B2B businesses today. It's
not
like,
according to Hockey Stack, Mac.
Did they say it's more or less?
Oh, Hockey Stack had this stupid, ridiculous report that came out that just people blew up about over the last week or so.
Did they say more or less than that?
They said it's like 105. I mean, out of a data set of like 100 businesses, like 50 or 100 businesses. I don't know the exact thing. Maybe, Nick, you know.
Is that on a per deal basis or is that overall?
See, these questions are so good because I don't know any answer to them. First off, all I know is people roasted them because the methodology of this like data insight was somewhat.
I mean, that's
poor.
To be fair, you could probably say like the methodology on almost like any of these B2B reports are always like
but let's clap for that. But that's
yeah. I mean, like, right? Like I can write a post that proves to you that cold calls are the best way to sell. I can also write one with data that proves that cold calls will never work. Like it. I can do whatever I want, right? Like my favorite stat is the news. One of the stats everyone loves is that 57% of B2B buyers prefer cold calls. You see cold call advocates promote that one all the time. And it's like, well, okay, it's a study from 9 years ago. And like nothing's changed in a decade, right? It only interviewed 120 buyers. So like really tiny sample size. And the actual question was, which channels are you okay being contacted on by sellers? So actually, only 57% are okay being contacted on the phone. So 43% were like, do not contact me on the phone. So the real number behind that stat would be half your buyers do not want you to call them. It's actually how I would interpret that stat, right? But everyone always uses it to say, see, they prefer cold calls.
No. But the point you're making is extremely important. It goes back to Nick's question.
Yeah.
All of that is garbage, noise, fake news, whatever you want to call it. And maybe some of it is fact and whatever, depending on which lens and the methodology. The most important thing, though, is who do you trust?
It's who is the messenger, not what the message is.
But that's only within your body.
Yeah.
Right? Like we each have our own trust barometer, right? Yeah, and I think the point you just made on the messenger versus the message is important. The messenger is more important than the message. When together they can become like this 1 + 1 = 3 effect. But that is the day we live in these days.
You don't have to read any reports. I think if you work in sales and marketing, you feel it in your bones that shit's harder than it was 5 years ago. Like that's just, I have not spoken to someone that works in revenue or go to market or anything that wouldn't agree with that statement. Maybe there's some weird outliers of like the hot new AI company right now and they're just like booming. But in general, it doesn't matter what the reports say. Everybody knows it's harder. Everybody knows it takes more touch points. It's harder to measure, whatever. But that's why it's like, at the end of the day, like whether it's you or anyone listening to this, think about the last time you bought something that cost you more than $10,000. Think about the process you went through. Did you talk to peers to get feedback? Like, hey, anyone used this tool before? Hey, I'm considering buying this car. What do you guys think? You know, et cetera. Did you get it referred it? Did someone mention it to you? Did you hear about it in the community? Like, yeah, maybe you saw ads. Maybe you heard from a salesperson, but really think about like, what was the thing that made you go, you know what? I want to talk to this company or I want to learn about this product. And it's like, once again, I know stats are kind of bullshit, but like there was a Gartner report that said 84% of B2B buyers start their buying process with some form of referral. And then, of course, you know, sales or marketing gets credit. Marketing gets credit because it was an inbound lead, but it was really because like Nick told me about it at dinner and I went and then filled out the form. Like, see, the website works. And you're like, your website could have said you kill babies for fun and I probably would have filled it out because Nick told me it was a great product. Like it actually doesn't matter, right? Like the word of mouth and the trust is everything.
So what are some tangible ways people can grow their network so the people that they bring into their network trust them in a way? Like you can take this question any direction because I'm giving you a blank canvas, Mac.
Oh, I don't want to use the word authenticity, but like give to the network before you take out of the network, I think is the best way to think about it.
Give an example though. Give a tangible example of that. How do you do it?
How do you do it? This is why I think a lot of go-to-market teams are afraid of this approach because it inherently is not this like perfectly measurable playbook of just do A and then do B and then do C and then boom, magic, you'll make $1 million, right? Like it's this sort of fluffy, like you take it, you bury it, you forget about it for 6 months, you come back, you go, oh shit, like there's a money tree here now, cool. Like that's what building a network really is, right? The Scott Leese example, right? He didn't get $35,000 from referral because he just woke up one day and wrote an email. Like there is probably decades of work that have gone into making that possible for him. Before you talk about any tactics, it starts with a mindset shift. And it starts with like, you have to actually give a shit about people, about what you're building for them, what you're solving for them, helping them, whatever it is. And it starts with just like being a connector, right? Like being the kind of person that people, the best way I put it is you have to be the kind of person that people want to help. You have to be easy to help, right? Like, you know, there are personalities, I won't name anyone, but there are people that like, they could offer me $20,000 to refer people to their business. And I'm just like, I just won't do it because I just don't like them as a person. So like, they're not easy for me to want to help. I mean, an example, we bought a product a month and a half ago, and there were two options in front of us. Fundamentally, feature by feature, price, they were the same. I could have blindly thrown a dart and it wouldn't have mattered. I did not buy option A because I'd had negative experiences with the CEO of that company who had been rude and dismissive and basically shit-talked me in the past. And so my mind was like, I don't care if you have a great product. I don't want to support you as a person. And it's those little moments, like that's, I guess, a sidebar is that like network and stuff can also have negative network effects, right? Like,
but to that point, this is a very important lesson for everyone listening. Who you associate with, who you partner with, who you hire is a reflection of you/your brand, like the company's brand. So I don't think enough companies pay attention to that. So getting a tangible thing, it's like, the act of the decision-making of who you bring onto your team, who you let go, who you recognize, who you decide to partner with, who you integrate with, all of those things, like what you stand for, those are the ways in which you build a network and you establish a reputation, which you ultimately don't decide.
It's tens of thousands of micro moments. It's not one thing.
That's what I think a lot of people miss because it can't be measured, to your point. So the goal of today's conversation is to say, lean into the power of networks, but to lean into the power of networks, you have to be very thoughtful, to your point, Mac, and deliberate with how you cultivate the relationships within that network. And it can be in direct ways, like through a conversation like this, and we're getting to know each other and we're giving value, we're teaching each other, we're helping you, whatever. But like, there's also a lot of indirect ways that happens too.
I mean, I hate the phrase personal brand, but in the same way that brand is not just your colors or your logo at a company, right? It's like, what do I feel when I think of HubSpot? What do I feel when I think of Salesforce? What do I feel when I think of Pipedrive or Adio or any other CRM player, right? And it's like, there is a feeling you get, right? Like I think of Adio and I go, ooh, that's a really cool up and coming player. I'd love to try them one day because it seems slick, but like, I don't know if I want to take that risk, right? I think of HubSpot, I'm like, okay, HubSpot feels like the middle ground. They're kind of cool. They're kind of hip still. Like I like their vibe as a brand. They feel more aligned with Commsor as like a brand, right? Salesforce is like the big bad enterprise elephant in the room. But your personal brand is the same thing, right? People think about personal brand as like the number of followers you have or the content you write. But no, it's like, it's what do Mark and Nick say about Mac when Mac's not in the room? That's what your personal brand is, right? What does Mark say when someone says, hey, I'm considering applying for a job at Commsor? Like, what do you think? Should I work there? Is Mac worth it? And you're like, no, that guy's fucking insane. Like he's a terrible CEO. Don't work for him, right? Like you said, it's completely immeasurable, which is why in a world where everybody is trying to solve this like perfect attribution problem, which is just not actually solvable, but that's another thing, people are afraid of it. And that's why I think people fall back on checkbox marketing and checkbox sales. I can measure emails, I can measure calls, I can measure ads. Therefore, that's the better thing to do rather than starting with what's the best thing to do for my network and my customers, and then do that and then figure out what part of it can be measurable.
I like that. Remember when everyone was talking about dark social? And that was like the cool thing. Like, oh, you don't hear about that anymore. Kind of like went away. Weirdly, I feel like Chris Walker kind of went away too, because he was the one who obviously pioneered that. But I don't see his content at all anymore. But I mean, it's just word of mouth, building your networks. It's just, people always find fancy words for that. Let's dive into the last question before moving into the exclusive segment here. But if you had to think about the biggest misconception about the value of networks in today's startup ecosystem, what is it? Like, if you had to just pick one and be like, this is the biggest misconception and I'm doubling down on it, what would you say?
I mean, I think a lot of it is the attribution problem. I think it's just like, it's the people want to over attribute, over AI, over automate. They just want they want everything to be this like perfect silver bullet. And it's just, network is just such a messy, not straight line. And it's one of those things, I love the quote of I'm going to butcher it now, but it's like, society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they will never benefit from. To me, that's what like a go-to-network strategy for a company is like, there are a lot of things that you might do that are going to set the foundation for a successful word of mouth, dark social, go-to-network, whatever you want to call a strategy, that you might start doing now that you might not feel for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 24 months. Like it's the things you do now determine the company you'll be in 3 years. And I think we're so stuck on this like quarter over quarter mindset, this short-term mindset of like, it doesn't matter what I do as long as I hit my goals now. It doesn't matter what I do as long as I hit my goals next quarter. And nobody's thinking about the 4 quarters from now, the 8 quarters from now, the 12 quarters from now. And that I love the line of like, that short-term thinking destroys your ability to become a long-term business. And of course, you still have to the short term is important. You have to win the short term to have a chance at the long term. But I feel like most companies I talk to, they are not thinking more than 2 quarters in the future. They're not even thinking a year in the future. Maybe they're high level, but from like a tactics perspective, they're not.
Why do you think that is?
Part of it, I think people are scared. I think right now it's like, stuff's hard. So people are falling back on things they're familiar with. They're not willing to invest in things that won't pay off this quarter. But it all starts from the top down. I talked to a lot of salespeople, a lot of marketers who are like, oh my God, man, I wish I worked for a CEO like you who cares about having fun and cares about the long term. Because if I brought these ideas up, my boss would tell me get the fuck out of here. There's no way, right? You're never getting budget. What's wrong with you? So a lot of it it starts from the top down. If leadership isn't on board with long-term thinking, they're never going to give space to their people for long-term thinking or network building or anything like that. And unfortunately, a lot of leaders right now they're more concerned with, can they raise a round in 6 months? Which once again is a valid concern, but and there's a sidebar rabbit hole there. I think the whole having to build to raise your next round kills more businesses than it benefits, but we'll put a pin in that one for a future conversation.
Yeah, I think but the majority falls into 2 camps, if you will. The leaders, like you said, and business models.
Yeah. The VC category falls in like the business model bucket for sure. But yeah, it's definitely leaders. I talk to people all the time they're thinking about it, they have ideas for it, and they cannot get buy-in from their team to act on it.
Who controls the company at the end of the day does play a decent part in that equation, I think.
For better or for worse.
Yes.
You could be unlucky and be stuck with someone like me,
You're not so bad.
Could be worse, could be better, middle of the road, 5 out of 5, for 5 out of 10, sorry.
Sweet. Well, that wraps up this segment. If you want to continue this conversation, head on over to TAC Network. We're going to be diving into Mac's proven framework, all about go-to-networks. He's going to be diving deep. He's going to be sharing tangible tips. So if you want to continue that conversation, again, head over there and we will see you on the other side.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of GTM News Desk, presented by the TAC Network. To hear our full conversation with our guest today, head to the link in the show notes to subscribe to the TAC Network. Until next time, I'm Mark Killens.
And I'm Nick Bennett. Keep it people first, everybody.